And so I'm standing over by the multi-track. Roy comes in the room about maybe a minute into the first take of the first song of the whole project. He gets up out of his seat and he says, "Dave, I'm going in my office. If you need me, call me. If you don't need me, don't call me." And I'm like standing by the machine, and this guy's a real prankster, so I'm thinking he's definitely pulling my leg. Yeah. There's no way that he's walking out on the J. Giles Band. I mean, I would go to the Fillmore when I was probably 16 years old and see this band at the Fillmore East in New York in like 1970, 69. So they were an established band, unlike some of the other bands that we're talking about. They had already, this is probably their 5th or 6th record. Okay. Yeah, I didn't know that. They had a lot of records out that had done very well on Atlantic. And so I'm still standing there. The first song ends. The band kind of we had this console. It was called a data mix console, and the faders were the only thing on the flat part. And then the console tilted up. The EQ was kind of on a slight angle backwards, up like this, and then the VU meters were up here. So when you were sitting at the console from the studio, you could just about see if there was even anybody behind the console because the way it came up. So when he left, the band who's out in the studio, they can't see that he's left. And so they're still recording. And that take ends, no one's in the room but me, and they look inside and they go, "So, was that a good take?" And I'm like, "Yeah, let's do another one. Take 2. I slayed it. Hit record, slayed it. Go ahead. They do take 2. They finish that one. I said, "Do one more and come inside and listen." By now, I'm coming over to the console because now they're playing a little bit more intense and the meters are all starting to get into the red a little bit more. They're playing harder. So I'm starting to adjust things, and they come in after take 3, and I'm sitting there. This is what, 76, I guess? So I'm like 22 years old, something like that. And they come in and look at me sitting there, and they said, "Where's Roy?" And I said, "He's in his office. Do you want me to get him?" And they went, "No, you stay there. You'll do just fine." And I'm like, okay. We got through that whole day. We got through the next 6 months together. That record took that long to make, off and on. And when that record was over, I thought I had arrived. I thought, okay, now I'm an engineer. And I go into the girl who books time, and I said, "Susan, who am I doing next?" She says, "Well, do you have clients?" And I'm like, No, of course I don't have clients. I've just been in the studio with one band for 6 months. How could I have clients? He said, "Well, if you don't have clients, I guess you'll be assisting tomorrow." And I was like, fuck, that is a real ego blow. I've got to go get someone's coffee tomorrow, because as an assistant, it was not uncommon for the engineer or someone to go, "Hey, you, give me some coffee and go and give me a slice of pizza too while you're out," and be like, "Hey man, I just finished working 6 months with the J. Giles Band. Get me the coffee and the pizza as I told you to." I'd be like, man.
Was there a producer on the record?
The band. It was the first time the band decided to produce themselves. So, and I think that's why it took 6 months also, because bands should really not produce themselves. They're not very good critics of themselves. So we got through that record, and then. That's coming from that's my.
Is that your ring?
Yeah.
Okay, so there you go.
smoothest my ring. So if you hear that.
If I want a Grammy.
So I was really bummed, and so the band calls me up coincidentally, like 2 weeks later. The band calls up and says, "Hey, have you ever done live sound before?" And I said, "No, I've never done live sound." So, "Well, you want to come on the road with us? We're opening for Peter Frampton. This is the Frampton Comes Alive tour."
Wow.
We're opening for Frampton. So I think the smallest venue was 50,000 seaters. That was the smallest venue. We did 110,000 people at JFK Stadium. So every single place we went, and I had Clare Brothers as the sound system. But first of all, I've only been in the studio. Second of all, I've only been in the studio for like 2 or 3 years. And let me tell you, if you haven't done live stadium, it's one thing going to a club and the Mackie, you know, and you got like 16 faders, but when you're in the Clare Brothers and they've got a console that's probably at the time, probably 50, 60 faders large, parametric EQ. So, I mean, now, I would say live show, give me low, mids, highs, boom, because you got to go through and go, okay, as the drummer's playing, you're going, boom, kick drum, snare, overheads, da, da, next, bass, da, da. Within the 3 minutes of that first song, you've got to get it all together. It's much harder to get it together when you've got parametric EQ sitting in front of you. So, well, it should be -3 at 500, or should it be -3 at 450?
Yeah.
So, did that show, got through 6 months of that, and came back with my tail between my legs and my head hung low, and walked back to record plant and said, "Can I have my job back?" And the manager takes my keys, you know, a big ring of keys for every studio, and he throws me the keys. He says, "I knew you'd be back, and that's why I'm keeping your keys here." And I think I did Blue Oyster Cult was one of the. That's the next record I came back and did.
Then you did a record, AC/DC, for those
Yeah.
who rock. Mutt Lange, which Bob Bullock in the
Yes,
audience is actually
we can
working
share
with
some of
Bob.
those stories.
But there's
so
not, there's not a lot known about this guy, and he's this fascinating character that has a tremendous track record, and you're one of a few guys that got to spend time with him. And first off, I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Are the cannons real on that track for those about to rock?
The cannons are literally from a record. They're from the 1812 Overture. And what we did is we just played the record back, dumped it over to a 2-track, and edit, edit, and took that one hit, that one cannon fire, and some of you guys that have worked with tape machines, there was a time when you needed to fly things in. Bob remembers this very well. And flying was basically, if you had a multi-track and you wanted to take a passage of sound, whatever it was, whether it was a guitar lick or a vocal or anything, and put it back into the multi-track, you had to, you would hit record on the multi, you would time it, you'd usually pick a beat within the measure. You know, okay, on 3, I know I got to come in on 1 with this hit, right? So it would be, for those about to, you know, and I have for those about to rock, fire, boom. And I would time it so that every time, I would start the 2-track at the same place every time. And that's the trick of flying, is that you pick, let's say 4 before the 1. You'd pick, and you always start on 4. And if you're early, you would pick a new, you would wind back that 2-track and pick a new start point. And if you were late, let's see, if you were late, you would obviously move it forward and you'd pick a new start point. And if you were early, you'd move it back. And you'd take a little grease pencil and you'd mark it. And you'd mark it at the same place, obviously, every time. And eventually, through trial and error, you know, as long as you picked, I'm always going to hit play and spin the capstan to get it up to speed in one beat. I'm always going to hit on 4, so, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, boom, and it would, eventually you'd get it. And it really became pretty simple. It might sound more complicated, but it became really easy, and so that's where all those cannons came from. And Mutt, I finished Freeze Frame. This was really interesting, and that took a long time. And I really felt, at the end of Freeze Frame, I really felt like we had some hit songs on there. I thought Centerfold was okay. I thought the song Freeze Frame was okay. And you know, I went to France, and I went with a cassette, which was the medium at the time. And the very first day I get there and I see Mutt, I said, hey, and he was, the reason I got hired, by the way, was because supposedly he told me that his favorite record the previous year was Love Stinks. I think he was going through a divorce and it became a very pertinent record in his life.